So let's talk about Esther. I'm going to argue Esther is a security through people, person. Esther, Old Testament. Esther is an orphan, a literal orphan. Her parents die, and she's, I always forget, is Mordecai is her uncle or cousin? Uncle, yeah, uncle. So her father's brother is Mordecai. He takes in Esther, raises her. The story of Esther is really deliberate in where it's oriented in history. So you have, remember, the Jews were exiled, and they come back in 3 waves. There's 3 returns. There's Zerubbabel comes back in 538 and rebuilds the temple. And then Ezra comes back in around, we think, 458, and it's spiritual renewal. So he rebuilds the people's spirit, soul. And then Nehemiah comes back in 445 and rebuilds the wall. Right? So you have these 3 returns. The events in Esther take place between 478 and 473 BC, which is between Zerubbabel and Ezra. So there's a wave of people that leave Persia in order to go back to the land and rebuild the temple. And Mordecai and Esther do not do this. Their family decides to stick it out in Susa, the citadel, the capital of Persia. So they'd rather live in Persian society than go back and rebuild the temple and go back to the land of the covenant. Okay? This tells you something of their spiritual condition. Furthermore, Mordecai and Esther in his care move into Susa, the citadel, which the Persian city was built in like rings for defense. So you had walls within walls within walls. And up on the highest point was the actual palace. And the immediate ring around the palace was Susa, the citadel. So if you think of like Lord of the Rings, like Minas Tirith, it would be like the ring right around where the palace is sitting. So it's the innermost part. It's where all the socially mobile, upwardly mobile people that really cared about being in the inner ring of society, that's where you went to live. So again, it tells you something about Mordecai, his ambitions of being part of the inner circle of the life there in Persia. Ahasuerus, which is Xerxes the First, is the 4th Persian king. The story begins, he throws this big party, invites 15,000 guests to the party. After that, it's 6 months of festivities, followed by a 7-day feast in the citadel just for the men. And then Queen Vashti decides to throw a party for the women. And at the end of the party, Ahasuerus, Xerxes the First, is drunk out of his mind, and he calls Vashti, who has to come when he summons her, and he says, "Come and parade yourself before all the men and wear your crown, just your crown." And she naturally refuses, which causes this huge crisis. Maybe women everywhere are going to do this and be defiant to their husbands, women's liberation, stamp it out, right? So Ahasuerus says, we're going to get rid of Vashti, get her out of here. So that's how we get no queen in Persia. Between chapters 1 and 2, there's a time gap of about 4 years. Ahasuerus goes out on a campaign of war against Greece. Herodotus tells us this in his History of the Persian Wars. And he is defeated by Leonidas and the Spartans, the 300. Remember that? The movies and all of that? This is the same time. This is the same guy. He's defeated, returns with his tail between his legs. He's insecure, lonely, devastated, defeated, moping about. And to get his mind off of all of his failures, they decide, we're going to do The Bachelor Medo-Persian edition, right? And we're going to round up all these young ladies, and we're going to give them one night with the king as, he's going to take him for a test drive and pick his favorite, and that will be the new queen. And this is a really, Xerxes, he's a playboy, he's a drunkard, he's a pagan, he's fickle, he's lustful. This is not the dude you want your daughter to marry, right? But Mordecai utterly fails Hadassah, Esther. Utterly fails her. Any father worth his salt would say, when she gets picked, she has no option. She has to play the game, right? But any father worth his salt would say, find a way to disqualify. Just chew with your mouth open, be obnoxious, talk back to just get kicked out of the process. You don't want to marry, you don't want to get stuck with this jerk, pagan, and then if you don't get picked, you're used goods now. You've been discarded, and you're going to be stuck in the harem. And you're going to have food and drink, and you'll be protected. But I don't want that for you, right? So if Mordecai had done what he should have done, Esther should have found a way to bounce out of this process. But Mordecai is ambitious. He's moved to Susa the citadel. He didn't go back with Zerubbabel. He is trying to make his way into the Persian society. He wants to be powerful in the inner circle. He's trying to play the game. And this is his ticket. If Esther gets to be queen, I could maybe get in. So he decides to use Esther to feed his political ambitions. And importantly, he tells Esther, as she's going into this pageant, the Bachelor Medo-Persian edition, he tells her, keep your Jewishness secret. Just kind of tuck that down in a way. Why? Because we're not like everyone else. Probably it'll compromise your chances of being queen. The king probably doesn't want to marry a Jew, so let's duck, cover. We're immigrants in Persia. We don't want to draw attention to that part of ourselves. So you just bury your covenant identity and find a way to climb the ladder and get the king's pleasure and be queen. This is good for us. So I think Mordecai's really sold out here. This is not a faithful man looking to God for covenant loyalty and love and protection. He's not living as a true Israelite here. And he's steering Esther in really orphan-hearted tendencies, right? You got to be safe and keep your head down and don't draw attention. Keep your, the way you're going to be safe in the palace under the king's protection is by hiding who you really are, right? So he's saying, keep yourself safe by doing that. So he's security through. And for Esther, whose parents can't protect her, who Mordecai's not really protecting her, she thinks, well, maybe the king can protect me. If I just find a way to make the king happy and do everything the king wants and be the perfect little girl for him, give him everything he needs, then I'll be safe. I don't have parents to watch out for me. My uncle's not watching out for me. I don't feel like God's watching out for me, so I got to watch out for me, and the way I'm going to do that is by making a deal with the king, and I'll be safe in his arms, and that's how it's going to be okay. I think that's what's going on in the story. And it's kind of a mess. You have just look at the contrast between Esther and, say, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. And the way they were brought into cultural assimilation programs, retooling everything about their lives, and they found points of resistance, didn't they? Well, we can't do the meat. We'll do the veggies, not the meat. We'll be at the party, but we won't bow to the statue. I'll be in command in the empire, but I'm still going to pray. with my window open, even if it costs me, right? I mean, so you're looking at people who are trying to figure out how to navigate exile and are finding strategic points of resistance to retain their covenant identity under the pressures of exilic life. You don't see any of that with Esther. She's just assimilating, going with the flow, blending in, keeping her head down, hiding her identity, going in, right? That's what's happening. She gets coaching from the eunuch in charge of the harem. He says, this is what the king likes. This is what he wants. Here's what to bring. Here's how to give him the best night of his life. He'll never forget you. And she does. It says she did exactly as he told her to do. This is not a good thing. This is not a good thing. She becomes queen by selling out. Fast forward, you guys know Haman, the Agagite, who Saul was supposed to kill. You know this? King Saul was supposed to kill Agag, the Amalekite king, and thought he was being more merciful than God and spared his life. And that guy's descendant is Haman. And Haman's going to go finish what his great-granddaddy started and wipe out the Jewish people. It's crazy. Don't disobey God. God knew there was ethnic cleansing madman coming. And Saul was supposed to stop it before it started. And Saul thought he was more merciful than God. It's just crazy. Anyway, so Haman decides he's going to wipe out the Jewish people. And then you get this beautiful moment where Mordecai comes to Esther and he says, listen, everyone knows we're going to die. And for such a time as this, maybe you're in the right, maybe you can do something. Save your people. And Esther says, I haven't been to the king in a long time. He's not calling for me. He's interested in the harem right now. I'm getting old. He's tired of me. What can I do? And he says, go to her. Go to the king. And she says, is he going to send out a scepter? If he doesn't, I'm dead. And Esther says, call a fast. Fast for me, because I'm going to go in. Which is remarkable. You know, in the book of Esther, God's name is never mentioned. And yet he's obviously moving in every scene. Esther just happens to become queen. Mordecai happens to uncover the plot of the assassins. That king happens to be reading the archives of the story and remembers Mordecai and decides to honor him and demote, right? Make Haman lead him through, like all this stuff, right? So God is clearly, sovereignly working and it's by not mentioning his name, it's more obvious that he's at work. It's a rhetorical strategy in the book. Esther calls a fast. What goes with fast? Prayer. Fasting by itself doesn't do it. It's just a diet. If you want solidarity of your people because you're going to go walk into the king's throne room, you're not asking just for a fast. That's code. Pray for me. This is Esther's moment. Just like God is in the shadows, not mentioned, but fully present, prayer is in the shadows, not mentioned, but fully present. And this is Esther's moment where she realizes the king may not be the place where I get my security. And I have to look elsewhere. And she says, pray for me, fast with me, because I'm going to go in. This is Esther's moment of throwing herself on the mercy of the covenant-keeping God. It's her moment where she begins to act like a child of God. It's an inauguration of her faith. And of course, then she goes and has her parties and sets it up, which is great. I love it. She knows her man. She knows that he likes to be the intrigue, the mystery. It's what attracted him to her maybe in the first place. And so she kind of goes, well, I'll tell you tomorrow, come to another feast. I'll tell you tomorrow, come to another feast. And then she finally says, my life, my people. And he says, who is it? And she says, this guy, this wicked Haman. He's the man. And it is the moment of Esther's beautiful courage where she steps out, identifies herself as a Jewish woman, which puts herself totally at risk. But it is the moment she steps into the protective arms of her God. And God comes through. It's a beautiful story, right? So again, you're watching the story of how God saved the people through Esther's courage, but you're also watching how God is drawing his daughter's heart toward him to trust him as a child. The true orphan who has no one to protect her, who's been let down by Mordecai, possibly let down by the king, at risk, but whose God will never fail her. She's totally secure in his arms. It's a beautiful story, right? And again, you're watching the hinge of her identity formation as it's occurring in the story. Okay, let's go on to security through power. My guy here is Gideon. Gideon, for the sword of the Lord and Gideon, right? Gideon is in the period of the Judges when, the people are doing everything that's right in their own eyes. There's a cycle of, idol worship. Foreign oppression comes in as a response to that idol worship, that disloyalty to God. God sends a judge to deliver the people. They have a short-lived return to faithful worship of God. Then they revert to idol worship, and we do the thing all over again. Okay? And one of those cycles is Gideon. Judges were tribal warrior leader judges. They were interesting folks. This story takes place between 1179 and 1154 BC. So we're way back in the book of Judges. It's in Judges chapter 6. And it starts with this refrain that's all through the book, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. That's just how every story begins in Judges. They've been disloyal, they broke the covenant. The Midianites are a monadic tribal people known for their pillaging raids. They sweep in, they take over, they pilfer the crops, they seize the goods, they take what they can, they move on to the next town and do it all over again. And so, and the people of Israel are just overrun by the Midianites, and they don't know what to do. And they cry out to God, and they say, why is this happening to us? And the Lord sends a prophet with a message, and it says, I led you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of slavery. I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians, from the hand of all who oppressed you, drove them out before you and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell, but you have not obeyed my voice. So I rescued you, I gave you the land, and now you're turning to pagan gods. You've forgotten me. Implication, return, repent, come home. So great is God's love for his people that he sends a judge to the people of God. He starts a rescue mission, and it starts in Judges 6, 11 to 12. The angel of the Lord came, sat under a terebinth, a kind of tree, at Orpah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord said, the Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. I love this, right? So Gideon's in a winepress, which is the worst place to thresh wheat, right? You do that on the hilltop because you throw it in the air, the wind carries the chaff away, and the seeds fall down. So you always do that in the open air on the top of the hill, but he's in a wine press, which is a big pit where they stomped on the grapes and everything ran to the edges and collected in the trough. And so he's in a pit in the ground threshing wheat. And you go, why? Why would he be in a wine press? Well, if you're one of the Midianites and you see a guy threshing on a hilltop, which is easy to see, you run and take his wheat. But he's in a wine press because he's hiding so he can keep the wheat for himself, and no one knows where he is. No one's going to look in a wine press, right? Oh, mighty man of valor. I like this little fraidy cat hiding in a wine press. Oh, mighty man of valor. I love it. I love it. And God's calling him what he will become, not who he currently is. Right? He's calling him as he will be. Oh, mighty man of valor. And he says, Gideon replies, if the Lord's with us, why is all this happening to us? Why are we overrun? Where are all the wonderful deeds we've read of old? Where's the God? What have you done for us recently, God? I don't see much evidence that the Lord is with us. He's forsaken us. And the Lord says, go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do I not send you? So you want a rescue, buddy? You're the man. Oh, man of valor, hiding in a wine press, threshing wheat. Gideon's name means hacker, by the way. Hacker, which is, of course, funny because he's literally hacking at the wheat as it's falling. And later he's going to hack down the idols. And then he's going to hack the enemies. So Hebrews love these little word plays. So anyway, I'm sending you. So what does he do? He says, Gideon, listen to how he replies. Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. Do you hear the resentment in those words? I'm weak. I'm from the weakest of the clans, the weakest nation, the weakest clan, the weakest family, the weakest individual. If only I were stronger. If only I had might. Oh, if only I had valor, then I'd do something. I'd stand up. I'd thresh in the open. I'd send our enemies running. If only I was powerful, I'd be safe and secure, but I'm not. So I think he's security through power. I think that's what he longs for, but he doesn't have. See, you can have an idol that you don't actually have, but you can live for something you do not yet possess. I think he is full of insecurity, and he's striving to have something that he doesn't have, which is strength and power and control. He's scared. He doesn't want to take. God says, I'll be with you. I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. So I'll be with you. I'll be your strength. I'll be your power. And then Gideon does something that becomes a bit of a pattern for him. He's a fraidy cat. And so he decides he wants a bargain, some sort of guarantee of control. So he says to God, I need a security blanket. It's not enough to trust your promise. I need some tangible confirmation, demonstrable proof that you really mean what you just said. And Gideon's scared. He's dogged by all this insecurity. He's weak and beaten down. And his insecurity comes out now in these control impulses where he's trying to force God to prove himself to him so he'll know it's safe and he know he can trust him and he knows it's okay. It's control and power. Control and power to be safe. And so he says to God, okay, then I want to bring you a present. Don't leave here. I'm going to bring you a present. I'm going to set it before you. Don't leave. So he runs away, brings back a meal fit for a god. He brings meat and unleavened cakes. And the Lord takes his staff and goes and blows it up. Just right there. Just sets it on fire, blows it up, smithereens. And Gideon's like, okay, all right. I love this scene. All right, so then the Lord says, Gideon says, alas, O Lord, I've seen the angel of the Lord face to face. And the Lord says, don't be afraid. You're not going to die. So he goes, peace be with you. And that night, Gideon decides to do something he's never done before. He decides to be brave. And he decides to go tear down the Asherah poles to Baal, or the father's altar to Baal, and the Asherah poles for the fertility god that are all over his family farm. And he's going to build an altar to the Lord. But he's a scaredy cat, so he does it at night. He goes at night. So Judges 6:27, Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord told him, because he was afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day. He did it at night. This is literally what it says. He's afraid. So he did. He's like, I'm going to go do something brave, but I'm going to do it in secret and quiet. No one will know who really did it. We'll wake up in the morning, it's been vandalized. I don't know what happened, right? So then in the morning, there's a huge uproar. Everyone's like, and they finally trace it back. It must be Gideon. And his father stands up and defends him. This is what his father, Joash, says. If he, Baal, is a god, let him contend for himself, because it's his altar that's been broken down. Therefore, on that day, Gideon was called Jerubbaal, to say, let Baal contend against him, because he broke down this altar. So from this day, Gideon becomes a tribal hero because he has desecrated the altar of Baal and got away with it, right? And so everyone starts going, man, maybe Gideon is the guy that we could rally around to defend ourselves against the Midianites, the Amalekites. So then another big raid occurs, the Midianites, Amalekites that come in, and the tribes of Israel assemble before Gideon. Some 32,000 men show up, and they say, what are we going to do, buddy? Let's go take it to them. You tore down some altars. Let's go big this time. Let's take them down. And Gideon is, again, full of fear and insecurity. He feels completely out of control. He doesn't know what to do, and he doubts the Lord is with him. And so in Judges 6:36, he says to God, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, behold, I'm going to lay a fleece of wool on the threshing floor, and if there's dew on the fleece alone and it's dry on the ground, then I'll know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. And it was so. And he rose the next morning, and so it was, right? Now, it's easy to get critical of Gideon. He's scared, but God is so gracious. He honors the test. It's a test to try to gain some sense of control over his circumstances. Is God really for me? He's trying to control. He's scared. He does not feel safe, and he's grasping for control. And then he realizes, I blew it. That's what normally happens. What was I thinking? Okay, God, let's reverse it. We'll reverse the test. Can I have a dry fleece on a wet ground? I love this guy. It's not a lot of faith, is it? I mean, it's not. He's trying to control. And God is so patient. So patient. He says, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. Just what you want. So again, we see Gideon looking for security through power. He's trying to get some sense of control over his surroundings. So then, fleece in hand, Gideon decides with his 32,000 men, let's go do something. God's with us. Now watch what happens. Again, this is not just the story of how God saved Israel. This is how the story of how Gideon is under the hand of God's loving discipline as his soul is being shifted and crafted here. God says, why don't you just send away anybody who's not feeling great about battle? You know? It's not like, it's not like the great general's like, not today, this is our moment. Don't rally the troops. No, just go, if you've got a little tummy ache, you miss your mom, you're worried about dying, why don't you just go home? It was so funny. 22,000 people return, 10,000 remain. So the force is reduced by 68%. This is huge. Disorienting. For a guy who's a security through power guy, how messed up is that? He's like, what are you doing? And then God says, go down to the river and let's see how they drink the water. Okay, now this is where theologians go crazy. Everyone's like, well, why did God pick the people that did the water? You know why God picked the ones that lapped the water out of their hands? It was the smallest group. That's why he picked it. God prunes it down to 300 men. He is weakening his forces to the point where they can't win. That's why God picks the water lappers. It has nothing to do with water drinking technique. Nothing. It's the smallest number. So now you're down from 32,000 to 10,000 and from 10,000 to 300. less than 1% of the original force that came out to fight with Gideon. So for a guy who already struggles with insecurity and fear and an inability to trust because he feels weak and doesn't have power, this is devastating. And God knows, and I love this, God knows Gideon so well. Before Gideon even asks, he decides to give Gideon a sign. The thing he's been asking for, negotiating for the whole time, God says, I know you, my son. I'm going to give you a sign. Why don't you get your buddy, go down into the camp, and if you think you're afraid and insecure, wait till you see these guys. He goes down, and they have these dreams about Gideon and his forces coming and destroying the entire army. The battle's already begun in their heads. And the rumor runs through the camp, Gideon's coming. God has given Midian and all the camp into the hand of the sword of Gideon and the son of Joash, a man of Israel. A man of Israel. We're done for. And for the first time in Gideon's life, he doesn't ask for a sign. He doesn't throw a fleece out. He doesn't say, I'm going to give you a meal, blow it up. Like no contract, no negotiation. He doesn't lay out a test. He simply believes God. He knows where his security and power lie, and he trusts the Lord. And he calls his men, arise, for the Lord has given the host into the hands into your hand. Now, remember, Gideon's got the high ground. He's around the outside. Midian's in the valley. And they would have heard rumor of the 32,000 people who had come out to fight. They don't know they've gone home. So when the 300 come around the rim with their jars and flames and swords and clamor and shouts and trumpets, they think they're surrounded and there's 32,000 people coming down upon them. They panic, they rout. In the dark, they can't tell what's going on. They start slaying each other and they start running, and of course they just clean up, right? And the Lord delivers his people. But he is showing Gideon where his true power lies. He's raised him up. And at the end of this, at the end of Gideon's life, they want to make him king. And Gideon knows where true security lies, and so he says, no, don't make me king. I don't need that power or control, because, listen to what he says. Gideon said, I will not rule over you. My son will not rule over you, for the Lord will rule over you. He alone is king. Some trust in chariots, some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. The power is not in me or my son or my line. The power is in the Lord's hand. We are children of the covenant-keeping God who fights for his people. Don't give me the throne. All right, let's talk about security through possessions. Security through possessions. I'm going to pick up the pace just a little bit. Naaman in the Old Testament. By the way, Naaman, his name in Hebrew is Naaman, but no one says that, okay? And so I'm going to call him Naaman, even though I know that's wrong, okay? But I can't remember to say Naaman, but that's how you say that name in Hebrew, okay? So Naaman. This is 2 Kings chapter 5. During the days of, remember, Elijah and then Elisha. This is Elisha, the protege of Elijah. We are in the middle, like 892 to 832 BC. And Naaman is a Syrian general. Syrians to the north, they're enemies of Israel. And we read in 2 Kings 5:1 that he is a mighty man of valor. He's a warrior, and he is in the high favor of the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad II, who's also Adad Idri, if you know anything from this history. And he's a war hero. Josephus and the Jewish Targums both record that the archer who fired the arrow who pierced King Ahab and put him to death, which Elijah had foretold would happen, was none other than Naaman. Okay? This is the guy who killed the king of Israel, Ahab. So Naaman is a war hero. He's mighty and valiant, powerful, connected, affluent, wealthy. You'd be able to spot him anywhere. I mean, this guy, head and shoulders, everybody knows who he is. He's got military regalia, highly decorated, flanked by an entourage of officers. He walks with strength and valor. He has everything you could possibly want in life. He's got it all, except for one thing, his health. He's a leper. He's got a skin disease of some kind that's deforming, contagious. Might be leprosy proper, but it might also be some sort of psoriasis, open sores, some sort of very contagious skin disease. It's a generic term. They used leprosy. And here's the point. Naaman had secured everything he could possibly want in life. He'd secured, he possessed military might and secured his command. He possessed cunning insight, which he used on the battlefield, and secured a seat in the royal court with the king. He possessed immense wealth, securing a place in society. And he possessed a great deal in life, but to secure himself against all the vulnerabilities that might come his way. But the one thing he could not possess was his own health. And he couldn't secure it. And so he has the world at his fingertips, but the problem is his fingertips are covered with leprosy. And as they say, if you haven't got your health, you haven't got anything. So and then we get some backstories. The Syrians in one of their raids had carried off a little girl who grows up now in the Syrian land and is part of Naaman's household. She attends Naaman's wife. And she says to her mistress, would that my Lord were with the prophet who's in Samaria, which is the capital of the southern kingdom here. Northern kingdom. So, capital of the northern kingdom at this time. In Samaria, were you with this prophet? And this it's amazing, this little Israelite girl who grows up, I mean, she could be so bitter, but she actually cares for her. I mean, it's amazing, actually. And so she says, there's a prophet that could maybe heal him. And so Naaman says, I'm going to go see about this. So he goes to his king and he asks the king to write letters of introduction. Israel's a vassal nation that's paying tribute to the king in Syria. And so when the king writes a letter saying, this is my best officer, please give him a healing, it's not really a request, right? And so, and then Naaman decides to bring a bunch of wealth, 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, 10 changes of clothing, and letters of introduction. And so the vassal king, this is Joram, who's the son of Ahab, who's the one who shot to death by Naaman, is now king. Naaman shows up, the guy who killed his dad. Okay, I mean, and he is in his debt. He's under Syrian oppression. And he says, my healing, please. Now, this is like a trap. This is like a trap. If he can't heal, last guy got killed. I mean, he's afraid for his life. Joram is. And he can't heal. He knows he can't heal. So he's in bind. And Naaman shows up with all this wealth, 10 talents of silver, all this stuff. It's like $1 million in like contemporary. So he's got $1 million in a letter saying, I need a healing. What are you going to do about it? Shows up at the king. And the king panics. I can't do anything. But here's the point. Naaman is not well. He's not safe. His body is betraying him. And he's trying to buy his way out. He's trying to use his possessions to leverage his health so he can actually secure himself. So he's he's living oriented around all of his possessions. The one thing he can't possess is his health. It's the one thing he's trying to buy it off with the other stuff. And it's amazing. So he falls into this trap of trying to secure himself through his possessions. It's really easy to do. We do this now. We think our money will keep us safe, our job will keep us safe, our 401k will keep us safe. That's an American thing. That's our retirement accounts. Your insurance will keep you safe. We think this. And it's good and responsible to have all those things, but don't trust in them. That's the point, right? That's not where your true security lies. It doesn't lie in the treasures of the earth. So Naaman doesn't know that yet. He doesn't know that the Lord is his real security. And so he's trying to buy his health security through this stuff. So then we see Naaman getting humbled. So the king tears his clothes. He says, I can't heal. This is terrible. And then Elisha hears about this guy from Syria who's come, and he says, send him here. So Naaman goes with the horse's chariot, this whole entourage parade, down to the house of Elisha. And he rides up with all this, entourage and regalia. And Elisha doesn't even come out to see him. I mean, how humbling, right? This guy's a big deal. He possesses everything, doors open for him everywhere he goes, and Elisha just won't even give him the time of day. It's on purpose. It's on purpose, actually. He's a great man, Naaman, come from a great distance with a great problem and great wealth, and the least thing he could do is get a face-to-face meeting. A great man deserves a great healing, And then Elisha says, through his servant that he sends out, he says, you just bathe in the river 7 times. What you need is a bath. And Naaman is angry. This is 2 Kings 5:11 and 12. Naaman was angry and went away, saying, Behold, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? And he turned away and walked away in rage. Right? In all his military regalia, with all his letters, with all his possessions and wealth, and his $1 million, he can't even get an open door. He can't get his treatment. None of it's getting him anywhere. His wealth turns out to be worthless because Naaman wanted something money couldn't buy. His possessions couldn't secure his health. And not only that, his pride is wounded. I didn't come all this way to bathe in some crummy river. I've got the best rivers back home. 7 times, like I'm going to take off my military regalia and leave all my wealth behind in the wagons and stand naked in the water like a child with nothing to his name to get a bath? No way. No way. It's beneath me. So, you see, his illness ran more than skin deep. His illness went all the way into his heart. He's outside, he's leprous, but on the inside, he had a deadlier disease. His pride was destroying his own soul. And Naaman thought the way he was going to get everything he wanted in life was by being arrogant and entitled and buy his way into the favor of God. But God cannot be bribed. His gifts don't come to the proud and entitled, but only the humble and contrite. Naaman comes in search of healing, but his healing needs to go all the way down, not just to the skin. It needs to go into his heart. And God loves him so much that he chooses to heal his soul and his body. Not just his body, but his soul. So the servants come to him as he's walking away in a huff. And it's almost impossible to translate what they say, but here's the logic of it. You wanted some great assignment to do. Like if the prophet had told you to climb a mountain or battle a beast or kill a lion, like some big heroic act, you'd do that. Why won't you just do the bathing thing? Like, you came all this way. Why turn around now? Isn't that a great word after all? That's the phrase they use. You came all this way. So you have a choice, Naaman. Hold on to your pride and ride off unhealed, or humble yourself, swallow your pride, climb down from your mighty chariot, take off all your military regalia and the medals you've earned, set aside all your possessions, and in nakedness like a little child enter the waters and receive everything with open hands. So he went down, he dips himself 7 times according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. So his healing comes through humbling. He lost his pride, but he gained his purity. In contrition, he was cleansed. When he stood naked before God, vulnerable, exposed, with all of his adornments, accomplishments, privilege, power, possessions, and when he went into the water with empty hands, with nothing to his name, it is in that moment that the Lord was enough. He possessed the Lord's grace, and that was enough. It made him whole. And his inner healing, you see, came before his outer healing. His pride had to be surrendered to go into the water. It was the inner healing that came first, and then the symptoms of the outer healing were expressed as God made him whole on the inside and out. And Naaman is reborn, in a sense. He comes out of the waters, fresh, clean. It's almost imagery of baptism. We don't have that yet, but it's there, isn't it? And he returns to the man of God. He and all his company, he said, behold, I now know there's a God in all the earth, but in nowhere else on earth but in Israel. So accept now this present from your servant. And he tries to offload everything he brings, the $1 million worth of stuff. And Elisha says, you can't buy this. Why would he do that? He is trying to say, you cannot level the playing field. You can't repay grace. This is grace you've received. And that grace cannot be bought. So he doesn't accept the gift. God is no one's debtor. And Naaman discovers that the security he needs for the health of his soul and body cannot be possessed in human possessions, but it lies in being possessed by the grace of God. And it changes his worship. That's why he says, I'm going to go back, I'm going to bring this little thing of turf, and I'm going to worship. It's primitive, but at least he's trying, right? And then he says, and when I stand in court, like, the Lord forgive me because I'm going to have to do these like performative religious things. And Elisha, says, go in peace. Shalom. It's covenant language, which is shocking. This guy who slayed the king of Israel is now a covenant member. It's unbelievable. He's a child of God. God can forgive anything. Isn't that amazing?